The Niagara-class cruiser is a medium-sized starship developed in the late 2350s to fill the role of scout and patrol cruiser after the failure of the Cheyenne class to hold Starfleet over until the Intrepid class could enter service during the 2360s. The ship was a development of the earlier Rigel-class cruiser, using 9 existing but incomplete space frames as a basis for the class. Measuring in at 515 meters long, 335 meters wide, and 150 meters tall, the ship had a crew of 500 under normal operating circumstances, though as many as 750 personnel could be embarked with little impact on the vessel's performance if needed. The ship had a maximum speed of warp factor 9.9. Otherwise, the ship's statistics and capabilities were generally similar to those of the Rigel class, upon which the Niagara was based heavily. Development of the Niagara class was astonishingly brief for a vessel developed in the middle of the 24th century, with the initial prototype, the USS Niagara, going from design brief to functional starship in just 3 years between 2356 and 2359. The basic space frame was taken straight from that of the Rigel class as mentioned earlier, 14 ships being cancelled while in an incomplete state during the 2340s, after Starfleet cancelled further orders for the class in favor of a refit and modernization program of the older Excelsior class, with just 21 vessels entering service out of an initially planned 60 or more. The incomplete ships would be placed into storage and used as a source of spares for the Rigels in service, until they were examined and 9 hulls found to be in a suitable state for conversion. The ship and entire project was ordered after the failure of the Cheyenne class, a fast scout cruiser developed as part of the larger Galaxy family of starships, which began development in the 2350s to replace and modernize Starfleet's older, aging legacy fleet. This class, initially appearing to be highly promising, was quickly found to have a litany of issues, 2 of the most alarming being her wildly unstable warp field at high speed due to her unconventional layout, and long microfractures across her hull due to stresses from said layout. Although development of a new class to replace the Cheyenne, the future Intrepid, began in 2358, Starfleet knew there would be several years of gap between the cancellation of the Cheyenne and the introduction into service of the new ship, during which Starfleet would be without a fast scout vessel. As a matter of expediency, thus, the Niagara class would suit Starfleet's needs well, it being accepted that any conversion would have a short service life due to stresses on the hull from a larger reactor and power output than the standard model. Mounting 3 of the same nacelles as used on the Galaxy class, and the reactor from a New Orleans class, the USS Niagara entered service in 2359 and was put through her paces extensively, Starfleet not wishing a repeat of the Cheyenne debacle before further members of the class had entered service. The vessel passed these tests within acceptable levels of stress and speed, the final 8 ships being approved and entering service by 2363, the ships being used as scouts and patrol vessels across the Federation. The ships made waves for their unorthodox appearance, it being almost a century since Starfleet's last 3-nacelle design, the Federation-class battleships, had been withdrawn from service, the crews of the ships predictably coming to love them for their uniqueness, while officers and men of other ships derided them, doubtlessly starting many heated discussions between these groups off-ship on downtime. Serving for only around a dozen years apiece, the service lives of these ships were brief and direct. As predicted, the space frames, even with bracing, could not stand up to the stress of the high speeds at which they traveled for prolonged periods. One ship, the USS Princeton, would be lost during the Battle of Wolf 359 in 2367, while the survivors were gradually retired as the new Intrepid class entered service from 2369. Some ships were refitted, receiving old reactors from decommissioned Excelsior-class ships and losing their lower nacelle. Converted into transports with speeds limited to just warp factor 7.6, the 3 ships so refit would last until the 2390s, when they were withdrawn, being the only members of the class to see combat during the Dominion War. Albeit in use as transports for marine and engineering teams behind the front lines and always with escort, they saw very little direct combat against Dominion warships. Although their service lives were brief by any standard, and their appearance unusual, the Niagara class gave good service and provided a vital role as a stopgap while a purpose-designed ship was being developed. The ships also managed to reuse the hulls that would otherwise not have entered service of the remaining cancelled Rigels, making the ships one of the most effective use of Starfleet resources in recent memory. This odd Frankenstein of a ship played a key role for the Federation and should not be forgotten. So, the Niagara is a weird one. Aside from its class name, and that the USS Princeton was destroyed at Wolf 359, being a member of this class, we know next to nothing about these ships. So, I tried to come up with something that would make the class's service meaningful and interesting, even explaining her oddball appearance. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then consider subscribing if you have not already. Big thanks if you made it this far into the video, as that apparently helps the YouTube algorithm, or so professional YouTubers say. Anyway, regardless of that, have a nice day.